The next one here that's rumored to be in the writing pitching stage is the Hedge Knight, and I think the Hedge Knight has the second best, or I don't know, maybe the third best chance of being made. Yeah. And according to you, it's one of the best stories George has ever written.
Word for word, the Dunk and Egg stories are better than Ice and Fire, like word for word. Like obviously there's a lot more of Ice and Fire, but those three stories are really great. They're really great stories. You know, I'm a weirdo. I really like the Sworn Sword the most of the three, but I'm a little weird in that respect. But the maybe I just like it because weirdly I think it was the first one I read. But yeah, they're good. It's good. It's great source material. It's great. They're good stories. They're just fucking good stories.
For those of you who don't know, the Tales of Dunk and Egg is basically centered around this one man, Duncan the Tall, who eventually becomes Kingsguard to Aegon Targaryen V of his name, and is just a legendary story. Duncan the Tall is also referenced in Game of Thrones, specifically Season 4, Episode 2. Joffrey kind of takes a shot at Jaime by saying, 4 pages for Sir Duncan. And, looks to see Jaime's page is like, no pages for you, Uncle.
Uncle, what happened to your page? Someone forgot to write down all the great deeds.
And he goes, there's still time. But Hedge Knight, I think this one has probably the best chance. It'd probably be a limited series.
Yeah, and I think it's the one that George is most excited about himself. Because it's his actual stuff that he wrote. Mm-hmm. You know, he really loves the Dunk and Egg stories. You know, and it's real writing. It's real good writing. It's not world building, fire and blood stuff. It's like real precious stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think George would be, very adamant about that. I think they're great stories. I think they would be great to put to screen. I don't even think they'd be very expensive.
No, they wouldn't. You have a lot of jousting stuff. That would probably be where the most expensive stuff comes. But there's no dragons, so you save a bunch on CGI. And of course, with the anthology stuff, the reason I say anthology would be great is because you get like new actors and actresses every episode or every season because it has to be expensive. Right now, I'm sure Emma Darcy, they're probably not paying Emma Darcy or Matt Smith that much. But as the seasons go on, they become in demand. You got to pay them more to keep them around. With an anthology, you kind of save money on that, kind of. So
that's true. And no, absolutely. With an anthology, you save money on that. The costs don't go up. The nice thing about Dunk and Egg is that there's only two main characters. There's only two characters. Like you only have to pay 2 people.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. But no, Hedge Knight.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was like 2 people, but then again, if like you need those 2 people, you can't do an actor change. You can't have Dario like swap out.
That's why you do a limited series. Like you don't cover all of the adventures of the Hedge Knight of Tales of Dunk and Egg. You just limited series, not bad.
Well, yeah, you iron out those like contracts to start. You don't you don't leave anything to chance.
The next one here is, we've discussed this before, the Golden Empire. Once again, for those of you who don't know, Westeros / Ice and Fire, the world of Ice and Fire, does have their own version of China, of ancient China. And my argument is, what the fuck is the point in ancient China in Ice and Fire world when you can just do an ancient China show? One of my favorite shows of all time on Netflix is Marco Polo. I love Kublai in Marco Polo's. Literally, the show should have been about Kublai. Marco is the least interesting guy. Why do ancient China, fictional ancient China? Just do actual real ancient China. Why? Like, who fucking cares? But
Okay. This gets into like so you know how there's like a difference between Mexican food and American Mexican food? You know, there's like they're almost completely different beasts. And it's mainly because like Americans like certain things, but they want to feel like they're eating something foreign, so you mix it up and you like package stuff to people and make them think that they're eating.
I think the best analogy for this would have been Chinese food, because I know for a fact that Chinese food in America is not the same as Chinese food in China.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a few dishes that are similar, but yeah, you're not going to find General Tso's.
I was just thinking that.
Or General in China, you'll find Kung Pao chicken, but like you're not going to find General Tso's chicken. Like nothing's deep fried, in Chinese cuisine. They don't have deep fryers. But whatever the case, you've got California rolls. California rolls, like we think of sushi, we think of California rolls in America almost first, and with avocados and salmon. Salmon is not actually even a traditional Japanese like fish to eat for sushi. Like that's not a sushi fish, salmon. So like we think of salmon and avocado and stuff, and it's like, no, that's like not sushi. You know, like for like Mexican food, we think of like flour tortillas and melted cheese, and it's like, well, I mean, that's not what they're eating in Mexico, you know. We think of burritos. They don't eat burritos in Mexico, really.
You're telling me that the Mexicans don't have a gordita crunch? They're missing out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you can't find these things, especially even with Americanization. Like Taco Bell is popular in Mexico now, but like it's like, come on, you know. So yeah, no General Tso's chicken, which is like the American Chinese like dish that you're gonna get, right? So the idea is that like packaging of something is very important. You want to feel like you're eating Chinese food even if you're not eating Chinese food. You want to feel like you're eating Japanese food even if you're not eating Japanese food. You want to feel like you're eating Mexican food even though you're not eating Mexican food. So you want to feel like you're watching Game of Thrones even if you're not watching Game of Thrones. Okay? It's like, we want to serve you something about China, but you know, you want to feel like they're watching Game of Thrones, so we're just going to package it as Game of Thrones and call it Game of Thrones.
Well, my idea
I mean, that's kind of Andor. I don't know, you know.
No, you're right about that. You're right, because that's that. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. My idea for anything ET related, because we have almost nothing there, and once again, the job of the spinoff and of the showrunner is to get you excited for this. Why would any Game of Thrones fans be excited for ancient China in the Ice and Fire world when all they know about Ice and Fire and what excites them is Targaryens, Lannisters, dragons, the Iron Throne? We're going so far away from that. You have to
something that has absolutely zero influence on the story.
Exactly. Like
if you put something in a shy, you could argue that, well, I got a couple of characters from Melisandre's from a shy. Okay, at least I've got some connection because that's Melisandre's from. There's not a single character from ET. There's no. I'm trying to think of a single plot point, a single item, anything that comes from ET. Like what? Like I can think of a couple things from Lung, but that's like, you know, but like ET, nothing.
So,
right?
And this comes back to my point. Why are you going to go out of your way to do fictional ancient China when you can do actual real ancient China, which I would argue is way more interesting? But okay, Let's say you want to do fictional ancient China. Cool. Why hire someone to write all this extravagant things for the Ice and Fire world when you can just make your own fictional ancient China show that has nothing to do with Ice and Fire? Because if you're going to do an ancient fictional Chinese show in the Ice and Fire world, you're going to have to play within those rules. Does winter also come in this play in ET? Do they have like their own White Walkers or their own version of the White Walkers? So there are some pros and cons to doing it in the Ice and Fire world. But at this point, just make your own like fictional fantasy show that has nothing to do with Ice and Fire, and just have carte blanche to do whatever. Because once again, if the tagline of the show is like ancient China, but in the Game of Thrones world, what's going to keep people hooked in if there isn't anything familiar to Game of Thrones in there that they already like, you know, Targaryens, dragons, Iron Throne, so on and so forth. So it just doesn't make any sense to me from a financial point or from a point just to get the audience excited, which should be the point of the spinoff.
Yeah.
The next one I wanted to talk about is Snow, which we've already discussed before. Kit Harington said nothing about it. HBO didn't hint at anything in regards to the whole thing at Game of Thrones Con, so we don't know where this stands, but I think this has the best chance of getting adapted because people love Jon Snow.
People love Jon Snow.
And I would be most excited to see this because very rarely do we ever see the continuation of the story, what happens after the fact. Think of everything we've ever seen. Like, of course, I would have, this is way before Disney bought Star Wars. Star Wars, for the longest time, if you wanted to find out what happened after episode 6, you'd have to read books and comics and maybe a video game or two. But most people aren't going to do that. We never had in media what happens after episode 6. Same with Lord of the Rings. We don't know what happens after Frodo leaves for the Undying Lands.
So yeah, I know you're going to kill me. You're going to kill me as I explain, as I tell you this story. But I tried to start Better Call Saul, and I kind of like got bored and like didn't continue it. The first few episodes were just, I don't know, hard for me to get into, and I was like also kept back on the fact that it's like I already know what Saul's doing. But what I found the most fascinating and the thing I really watched were the black and white stuff of him continuing his story, because that was new stuff. So like the prequel aspect of it like bored me. Like I really wanted to know what happens to Saul next, which you do. I understand that like in the last season they do. You do follow what happens to Saul at the end, but Snow is like that. Like we're getting these prequel series, but we all know where it's all going to end up. But with Jon Snow, we don't. That there's something very alluring about that.
I agree. By the way, I'm glad you brought
you agree that those first episodes of Better Call Saul are hard to get into?
Dude, I got into it with someone in your comment section when you uploaded the podcast episode we did. Someone's like, Carmine, how dare you? How can you sit there and say Jimmy? I'm going to be honest with you. What really made that whole like series for me was everything but Saul. Lalo, the fucking Nacho.
Stories that you didn't know about.
Exactly. Gus, like, come on. How Gus builds his empire and builds the lab and all this stuff. Like, that's super. Mike, all about Mike and his whole thing. That's super cool. I love that stuff. Saul was the least interesting guy for me in that show. So, yeah, I agree with you. We're getting so much flack. We're getting so much shit.